We are in this. We are leaning on this. And without the tax cut that was put into place by President Trump in his first term, if that's allowed to expire today, if this bill does not pass, that hikes taxes for 68% of working Americans.
Right, and the biggest hikes would be for the lower household income. So, and also the pro-growth aspect of this, right? We want to grow this nation. We want to grow the economy. And taxes are a central part of that, particularly for corporations. Hold
the vice president breaking the tie right now, which means they had some no votes from those Republicans. This bill, the big, beautiful bill, has passed because the Vice President of the United States, JD Vance, has come to the Hill more than once thinking that he would do this. And when he showed up this morning, they were right. He would be needed. He has done it. Let's listen and see if there is any audio that we can take in.
Okay. Pursuant to the order, 4 February 29, 1960, the hour of 12 noon having arrived, the Senate having been in continuous session since yesterday, the Senate will suspend for a prayer by the Senate chaplain.
Let us pray. Eternal, ever-blessed God, help our senators to walk on your path for the glory of your name. Help them to walk with humility so that they will strive to be servants of the people. Help them to walk with forgiveness so that they will forgive as they desire to be forgiven. Help them to walk with courage so that nothing will deflect them from the way they ought to take. Help them to walk with endurance so that nothing may daunt or discourage them until they reach their goal. Lord, help them to walk with loyalty so that nothing will ever seduce their hearts from their devotion to you. We pray in your loving name. Amen. Amen.
And with that, we are watching now. The big, beautiful bill has passed on the vote, breaking the tie of the Vice President of the United States. And Charles, you were talking about the tax portion of this. What good does this do outside of saving what the president put into place with tax cuts that were monumental, really, for so many Americans across the country? What does this allow him to do going forward?
This is the crux of it all, really, to be quite honest. It's the growth effect, the multiplier effect of businesses keeping more of what they earn, being able to invest that into future products and being able to invest that into employees. And that's what the foundation of the economy is. And listen, obviously, it's one thing when you say things on the campaign trail and when you hope for things on the campaign trail. As we can see, this thing is very contentious. Just your conversation with Chip Roy shows that when it gets back to the House, there's going to be some more, fisticuffs or another Donnybrook, so to speak. But, President Trump put out a post yesterday talking about the growth aspect of this. And I think that's what he's focused on more than anything else. Make the pie bigger. Make the economic pie huge so that everyone can get a chance at an opportunity. Because it's one thing to save taxes as a lower income home. It's another thing to have have more prosperity, to grow your job, to grow your business, to have a business, to start a business. And I think that's what the president's aiming for.
Look, what you were talking about, and I want to get into it, Kennedy, at the very end of the Faulkner Focus, Representative Chip Roy and I were watching the lead up, the last few seconds of that final vote, and he said that the cuts that were put in place to make this deal, there are Republicans who, and I would assume he includes himself, are not happy about. And he's hoping that some of that, as Charles has just told us, can be, kind of put back in, I guess, by the House. But the cut down on Green New Deal, and they cut some of that out to make a deal today. The giveaways, this is Chip Roy, representative from Texas, talking, the giveaways furthering the Medicaid scam of, this idea that they're not just trying to get out fraud, but they want to just give money away, for Senator Murkowski of Alaska to vote yes for this. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so a lot of that was offsets from Obamacare. So that was expanding Medicaid for states like Alaska instead of really reforming the system. And it is, the way they're doing it, it's still a Band-Aid. It's still a stopgap. And I think they really have to focus more of their attention on these meaningful reforms going forward, because that shouldn't be the thing that kills this bill. That shouldn't be the thing that kills tax cuts. But it opens a very interesting fissure within the party, because you have the constitutionalists like Chip Roy and the Freedom Caucus in the House, and then you have the moderates in the Senate, like Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, who's up for re-election. And so they're going to push for the more moderate or liberal aspects of this bill that expand government and expand spending, which is a recipe for disaster when you're trying to cut taxes. If you're going to grow the economy, as Charles says, you also have to cut spending. And that's the issue that people like Rand Paul have with the bill.
Kennedy, do you think that it really came as close enough as Chip Roy, representative from Texas, was laying out, that if they would promise to give Lisa Murkowski the money that she wanted, I mean, could Democrats have tanked this in any way? I'm baffled, because we're at a tie, so clearly it was close.
They didn't need Democrats to tank this.
They didn't.
The Republicans did it all on their own, because they thought the more comfortable margin would be in the Senate. Because, mathematically, in terms of the ratio of Republican votes, you have more of them in the Senate, and they lost 3 of them. So it's even tighter in the House. So how you go back with this to the House and come up with a compromise, because, these are some pretty big issues. This is still a pretty big gulf that they have to tightrope in order to pass this bill and have it signed.
Well, and the other reason, Jerry, that they thought it might do better or easier, might be an easier road in the Senate, was because the Senate had promised all the spending cuts and all those things. But much of that, not much, but some of that got shaved to the point where Congressman Roy is talking about maybe they're not all comfortable with it the way it's cut down now.
That's right. So now it has to go back to the House. The House has to vote, obviously. And the question is, how does that happen? Does it happen? I think there's a very good chance that it happens, obviously. But let me just talk for a second about some of the stuff in this bill that is going to help middle class, because there's been a lot of disinformation about this. And the disinformation is basically that it helps Trump's billionaire friends. Nothing could be further from the truth. Remember, no tax on tips, lower taxes on Social Security, car loans on American cars, those will be deductible. So you're seeing a lot of things in here for regular Americans, going to help regular Americans, and nothing will help them more than Donald Trump's original tax cuts, right? They really help the middle class. It helps the lower class. So this is all good news. I want to say that the CBO has been no help here, because the CBO says that there's going to be $3.3 trillion more in deficits over the next 10 years because of this bill. They've got it wrong, and they've got it wrong for exactly the reasons we've been talking about. You brought this up earlier, that the economy is going to grow under this bill, right? It's going to get bigger. That's going to spend off more tax revenue and make our country wealthier.
Well, and the other thing, point, the CBO on the original tax cut bill said it would cut, add cut 1.5 trillion, and instead it added 1.5 trillion. It would add 1.5 trillion to the deficit. It cut 1.5 trillion out. So in other words, they were a million times wrong. $3 trillion off. So it's really awful with the CBO. Of course, they don't add tariff revenue and a whole lot of other things, but a lot of these folks in D.C., really seem beholden to it, and it's easy to game. So that always boggles my mind. I feel like it's more for public consumption than it is for actually being in a realistic world.
Yeah, Emily, presidents want that deliverable. They want that initial vision. The president got it already this morning. He's talked all in deep about the numbers, the 2,700 gang members that have been picked up in short order by his administration, illegal gang members, suspected gang members who were here as illegal aliens. So he's having a deliverable there. This conceivably could lead us to another one.
That's right. I spoke with border czar Tom Homan yesterday, interviewing him on Fox Across America when I subbed in for Jimmy. And he shared that the colossal just impact that we inherited from the Biden administration in the way of illegal immigration, he said, will take a decade to actually clean up and address. And we talked about the brave and efficacious work of ICE agents and DHS right now. But the reality is that we have to go internally and clean house. And so what this OB3 does in the way of resources for that and allocation is really paramount, because I think right now we've successfully, obviously, stopped the floodgates at the border. But the reality is that on the interior front, there's a lot that we don't know. And what we do know is that we need resources for that. And I also spoke with Congressman Rick Crawford from Arkansas, and he talked about the agricultural communities. He said those are the heart and soul of rural America. And when we talk about these tax cuts, I speak with everyone, what is the best for your constituents? What do your people need? It's all the same. That's the entire point, that the massive impact it would have had if this didn't pass or doesn't pass the House.
Right.
It will be catastrophic and devastating. Child tax credit, families over 68%, small businesses, millions of them. So every single person affected. And the senators Mullen and Tuberville from Alabama and Oklahoma echoed the same. So it may not be perfect, but the reality is it would be devastating if it didn't pass.
You know, just talking about it plainly, as we often do here, Emily, on the couch, if you can imagine struggling under the high inflation of at 9.1% under Joe Biden in the last 4 years, if you can imagine price setting going to higher rates and never coming back down. I mean, the inflation has come down precipitously, as President Trump had promised, but the government doesn't set the prices. We're a capitalistic nation. So, you know, those prices are still high. So to take away people's ability to pay for those prices that they've had to be buckled under and struggled under for 4 years with less money to pay for them if this doesn't pass the House, that's inconceivable. That would be punishment on punishment.
My dad he's almost 80, and COVID almost totally destroyed our small family farm and agricultural community, and it was made all the worse because it was in a blue area in Oregon. And the reality is he now does everything himself for all of that reason. The cost cutting that we have to endure because of the suffocation from federal regulations and the states piling in, you are right. You cannot afford it. We cannot afford to continue that.
All right, we're covering it. So now the bill, the big, beautiful bill, goes to the U.S. House.
Let's begin with Aisha Hasni. She's live on Capitol Hill for us to kick things off. Hey, Aisha.
Hey there. Well, things are moving fast already in the House, and that is because Democrats, the leadership there, is already summoning their entire conference back to the Hill immediately for a conference-wide meeting later tonight. And the Rules Committee, I am told, is going to meet in the next 30 minutes to start reviewing the Senate's version of this bill. For now, though, over in the Senate, celebrations over this big, beautiful bill finally got through the upper chamber after a almost 25-hour-long vote-a-rama, despite 3 GOP no's, and those three GOP no's were Senators Rand Paul, Tom Tillis, and Susan Collins. Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski saving Republicans today with a yes after some last-minute deal-making. Senate Republicans doubled the funding to rural hospitals from $25 billion to $50 billion, and that is meant to try to offset any issues that would arise from those Medicaid cuts in this bill. Now, Democrats tried to delay by offering up amendments up until the very last moment. And then, listen to this, Leader Schumer raising a point of order, forcing Republicans to strip the bill of its name, the big, beautiful bill, so it won't officially, in legislative text, be called that anymore. House conservatives have big problems with what the Senate just did, though, and that is where we look to now. The Senate was unable to include a provision to remove illegal immigrants from Medicaid, so that's a problem for some conservatives. And the House Freedom Caucus claims that the Senate's bill adds $651 billion to the deficit. The Speaker can only lose 3 Republicans, and he is already facing many, many angry conservatives.
This is the Senate wanting to try to save some for their home states, like Senator Murkowski for Alaska, trying to get giveaways to perpetuate the Medicaid money laundering scam in Alaska. It may not be today, it may not be this week, but we're going to deliver on the tax cuts, spending cuts, and the border funding necessary to save this country.
And despite that, Sandra, President Trump just said that he believes that this is going to actually pass a lot faster and easier in the House. We shall see. He might actually have to get involved directly.
All right.
Sandra?
Thanks for setting it up for us. Aisha Hasni, live on the Hill. Thank you. John.
All right, Sandra, Maryland Republican Congressman Andy Harris is the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. He also serves on the House Appropriations Committee, and he joins us now. Congressman, good of you to spend some time with us this afternoon. I wanted to read this statement from the House Freedom Caucus on the One Big Beautiful Bill. This was put out yesterday. It said, quote, the House budget framework was clear. No new deficit spending in the One Big Beautiful Bill. The Senate's version adds $651 billion to the deficit, and that's before interest costs, which nearly double the total. That's not fiscal responsibility. It's not what we agreed to. Now, I've been watching closely everything that went on in the House and now in the Senate, and I'm thinking to myself, if this bill is such a good idea, why is it having so much trouble getting through?
Well, I'll tell you, the last-minute changes in the Senate, like literally the very last amendment, probably added another $100 billion to that deficit by adding in some of the Green New Scam subsidies. The bottom line is this is not ready for prime time. We support the president's agenda. The president's agenda was not to raise the deficit by $750 billion over the next 10 years. The bottom line is now the House is going to have its say. This is not going to sail through the House. We're going to have to negotiate with the Senate one more time, and that's just appropriate. That's the way the legislative process works and the way it should work on a bill of this size.
So where are you on the bill that came out of the Senate?
Well, you know, the rumor is that we might have a rule vote tomorrow. The rule is basically our motion to proceed. I don't think the votes are there, just like they weren't in the Senate initially until some concessions were made. I believe that the rule vote will not pass tomorrow morning, and then the Speaker's going to have to decide how he gets this back into the Senate framework, but into the House framework, I should say, and whether that's by scaling back some of the tax cuts that were added in the Senate, whether it's by going after some of the Green New Scam that the president doesn't like. We'll get there eventually, but I don't think it's going to be in the next couple days.
No, but just for clarity purpose, are you a yes or a no on the Senate bill?
Oh, I'm a no on the rule, which is the motion to proceed to taking a vote on the Senate bill.
Okay, so again, I come back to this idea of this is the president's big signature legislation. This is what he wanted the House and the Senate to do now that you control, the House, the Senate, and the White House. But it passed in the House with a 3-vote margin. 5 Republicans didn't support it. It passed at a tie break in the Senate. I mean, the margins are razor thin here, and yet this is the president's signature legislation. What's going on?
Well, that's absolutely right, but that's why it's going to have to be a compromise between the House and the Senate. And right now, it's not. Right now, this is all a Senate bill. Again, $750 billion additional deficit added to our children and grandchildren. This is just not fair. We have to let the legislative process work out, which is now the House and Senate go into a real discussion. Not what happened over the last 24 hours, which is, again, as my colleague Chip Roy said, it's just giveaways to senators to buy their votes, costing, again, hundreds of billions of dollars. We have to do the hard legislative work to get this thing across the finish line.
All right, so Elon Musk had some pretty harsh words for the House Freedom Caucus. He said the following. He said, how could you call yourself the Freedom Caucus if you vote for a debt slavery bill with the biggest debt ceiling increase in history? What do you say to Mr. Musk?
Well, that's exactly why a group of us are not going to vote to advance the bill until we iron out some of the deficit problems with the bills. And look, Mr. Musk is right. We cannot sustain these deficits. He understands finances. He understands debts and deficits. And we have to make further progress. And I believe the Freedom Caucus will take the lead in making that further progress.
All right. So the president wanted this on his desk by Friday, the 4th of July. That's not going to happen. You're not even going to start looking at this until next Wednesday. And I'm just wondering, is this going to make it across the finish line?
I do believe by next Wednesday we can come to an agreement. The bottom line is we can't do it in the next few days, but I do believe by next week we can come to an agreement. And again, they're going to be last-minute changes, just the way there were in the Senate. That's the way the system works. That's the way the legislative process works, and the nation and the country will be better for it.
All right, we'll keep watching it, but you're not giving the president his Independence Day present that he wanted. Congressman, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. We'll stay in touch.
Thank you.
On this vote, The yeas are 50. The nays are 50. The Senate being evenly divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative. The bill as amended is passed.
It took Vice President Vance's tie-breaking vote in a marathon session, but the Senate has passed the big, beautiful bill, and now it is once again the House's turn. So here we go. As we head into hour two, welcome back as America Reports. I'm Sandra Smith in New York.
And I'm John Roberts in Washington. Right now, the House Rules Committee is meeting to prep the spending plan for the House floor. The full chamber set to meet tomorrow to debate and eventually vote on the measure. President Trump optimistic that he will soon be able to sign it into law.
Well, I just heard that about the Senate, and the bill just passed, and it tells you there's something for everyone. I mean, it's a great bill. There is something for everyone, and I think it's going to go very nicely in the House. Actually, I think it will be easier in the House than it was in the Senate.
President Trump's chairman for the Council of Economic Advisors, Stephen Myron, is here. He will react in moments.
But first, our senior congressional correspondent Chad Pergram is live on Capitol Hill. Chad, it barely got through the Senate. It had to be with the tie-breaking vote from the vice president. Can they get it across the finish line back in the House?
Well, John, good afternoon. It was high drama to pass the bill in the Senate. The House is the next stop. One of the biggest advocates for the bill is Oklahoma Republican Markwayne Mullin. He served as a liaison between the Senate and the House.
I do believe we have a good chance to get it done. I can't speak for the House. I made myself very available to the Speaker and to the House. If I need to come back in town, I'll be happy to come back into town and visit with them.
There were 3 GOP no's in the Senate: Susan Collins, Tom Tillis, and Rand Paul. Collins says reductions to Medicaid funding could threaten rural hospitals. That's why she voted no. Senators added $50 billion to boost those hospitals. That helped score the vote of Alaska Republican Lisa Murkowski.
The problem was around the cost cutting, the cost savings Medicaid, how it affected our state. We came up with a fix to basically increase the rural hospital account, doubled it, and that will help all of our states. So, you know, just methodically working through how this bill affects Alaska.
The question is if the House will accept the altered Senate bill so quickly. Some House conservatives don't like how the Senate changed the bill the House approved back in May.
The Senate right now is messing up the bill and risking the whole thing. This is the Senate wanting to try to save some for their home states, like Senator Murkowski for Alaska, trying to get giveaways to perpetuate the Medicaid money laundering scam in Alaska. I think this is a travesty that the Senate is going to risk the ability of us to deliver for the American people.
Now the House plans to vote as early as tomorrow afternoon. Senior sources say they will apply peer pressure on reluctant GOP members to vote yes. Plus, they expect President Trump to push members to pass the bill before July 4th. John?
Based on what we've heard from a couple of intransigent Republicans, they might need an awful lot of peer pressure. Chad, thank you so much.
Norman just indicated that he would be a no on the rule here, and Andy Harris, Republican of Maryland, he indicated that this might take a few more days. We'll see what that peer pressure is like, especially coming from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Peer pressure may turn into some pretty serious arm twisting. We'll see. Thanks, Chad.
All right, for more on this, let's bring in the Council of Economic Advisors, Chairman Stephen Myron. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. So for those who are for this bill, perhaps you have something to give them to be optimistic about here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to see you guys. Look, you know, I think that the bill brings an enormous amount in terms of revenue from boosting economic growth. A lot of numbers get flown about from the CBO and other sources, and none of them include the effects that the bill will have on economic growth, which, let's remind ourselves what happened with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. In the face of all of the doubters, economic growth in the president's first term until COVID was 2.8%, real economic growth, right? If you look at corporate revenue as a share of GDP, it went from 1.6% of GDP to 1.8% of GDP, despite the reduction in corporate rates. And this is how pro-growth economic policy works. It boosts economic growth. More income means more tax base. More tax base means more revenue, and that brings deficit down. We calculate that between all the president's policies, from the One Big Beautiful Bill, the deregulatory agenda, the energy abundance, they'll boost economic growth by about a percentage point. This brings in about $4 trillion more revenue. So whereas the Congressional Budget Office says this thing's going to cost $3.25 trillion, we say that's nonsense. You have to include the economic growth that's going to come as a result of the bill. bill and the other policies from the president, and then you add $4 trillion to that $3.25 trillion deficit, you get to plus $750 billion surplus. So there's lots of revenue that's coming in from economic growth and other sources that are going to bring the deficit down.
Okay. There's a lot of calculations there that you have made. It has not convinced some, including Andy Harris from the House Freedom Caucus. He joined us last hour and said this. I'll get you to respond.
This is not ready for prime time. We support the president's agenda. The president's agenda was not to raise the deficit by $750 billion over the next 10 years. The bottom line is now the House is going to have its say. This is not going to sail through the House. We're going to have to negotiate with the Senate one more time, and that's just appropriate. That's the way the legislative process works and the way it should work on a bill of this size.
So, Stephen, how do you respond to him?
So what I'd say is, number one, voting against this bill is effectively voting for the biggest tax hike in history, and that would be really bad to stick American workers and American businesses with a $4 trillion tax hike that'll send the economy careening into recession. But what I'd also say to him is that the deficit will come down. The deficit will come down through economic growth and other policies that we're implementing. Let me tell you all the things that are not included in the CBO score that are getting ignored by the doubters in this process. There's better revenue from economic growth that I just mentioned a moment ago. That's about $4 trillion. There's going to be about $3 trillion of tariff revenue coming in, too, that because they don't come in through the legislative process, they don't get counted in the score. But those $3 trillion are as good as any other dollars for bringing down the deficit. There's about $1.5 trillion of further administrative cuts. These are things like reduced headcount at federal agencies, the government becoming more efficient, doing more with less. And there's also another about $1.5 trillion of reduced interest expenses because we're borrowing less for all the other things. You add all this up, you get to about $8.5 to $11 trillion of growth across all of these different means of, $8.5 to $11 trillion of reduced deficit from all of these means of bringing the deficit down. And it's all in all, combined, extremely powerful. And so it's very, very powerful deficit reduction. It'll bring the debt to GDP ratio down by over 20 percentage points relative to what the CBO expects.
Okay, so this was Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent taking on claims that, well, that this only benefits the wealthy in this country. Listen here.
This is a deal for working people because what we have is President Trump's 2017 tax bill, and we are overlaying that with the president's campaign promises. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, the lower tax on Social Security, and tax deductibility of American-made cars. Those sound like working-class tax breaks to me.
So that's how he takes on the claims that this only benefits the wealthy. How do you respond to those?
So I think Secretary Bessent is completely correct that things like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, these are all aimed at the working class and at seniors. And that's a very, very, very progressive means of doing tax policy. But let me say one other thing, which is that the best way to help the working class is to create an environment in which firms want to hire them. If firms are growing, if businesses are growing, businesses are prospering, businesses are expanding their lines of operation, they need more workers. And when they need more workers, they hire them and they pay them more. And so the president knows the best way to create jobs, the best way to boost wages is to create an economic boom, an environment in which businesses just want to hire as many people as they can. And that's what this bill does. The full expensing on investment, on new factories, on equipment is going to create a manufacturing boom that will create such demand for workers. It's going to raise all wages. And this is exactly what happened in the president's first term. In the president's first term, real wage growth was about twice what it was during the Obama administration. And then if you look, the lowest 10% of earners had wage growth at twice the rate as the highest tenth of earners. And so the president created successfully a blue-collar boom through his policies in his first term. And Americans remember that. And Americans know that a pro-business president who creates a good environment for firms to hire is the best thing for them. And that's why they voted overwhelmingly in a landslide to re-elect Donald Trump.
Why do you suppose that the margins are so narrow, considering all that you're touting is in this bill?
Well, I think that's just the simple arithmetic of a closely divided legislature. And look, if we had an additional 20 or 30 votes, obviously the margins wouldn't be as narrow. But in an evenly divided legislature, that's just what's always going to happen, no matter what.
Okay, I'll finish off with this. We're now looking at what will be a sprint to the finish line. The House Rules Committee, one might say, is the final gatekeeper here. So what's a realistic forecast for what happens as we head into tomorrow?
Look, I think that everybody knows we need to get this bill over the line. Everybody knows the consequences of not passing the bill are a disaster, the biggest tax hike in history, a recession, millions of people losing their jobs, 9 million people losing their health insurance. Everybody knows we need to get this bill over the line, and we are united on doing so. And at the end of the day, that's what we're going to do. And have we set ambitious targets for ourselves? Absolutely. But time and again, the president has delivered on those ambitious targets. Nobody thought that we would get the bill out weeks before Memorial Day, and we did. Nobody thought that it would be passed weeks before Memorial Day in the House, but it was. People thought the Senate wouldn't be able to pass it so quickly either. And so we've set ourselves an ambitious agenda, but every single step along the way, the president has delivered.
All right. Well, I guess it's all going to come down to 9 a.m. tomorrow as we head into Wednesday. And we do appreciate your time. We'll be watching. It's been exciting, perhaps too exciting for a few
Tell
different.
me about it.
All right. I really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully we'll have you back soon. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Great.
John?
All right. President Trump talking about a lot of different things that are on his mind right now. He says that more people are self-deporting than people realize. He's on his way back from Alligator Alcatraz, as we showed you live this morning. He's also obviously at the top of this talked about the bill. He says he believes that it will pass, the big, beautiful bill. He talked about primarying Thomas Massey, who's been a real thorn in his side on the House GOP side. But there are others who have registered some reluctance about passing this bill. Let's bring in the House Majority Leader, Steve Scalise, who has a keen sense, obviously, of which way his party is moving when it comes to major legislation. He was previously the whip on the House side. It's always good to see you, Speaker Scalise. Thank you very much. Majority Leader Scalise, I should say. Thank you for being here.
Martha, great to be back with you. Thank you for having me.
So give us your sense. You've got a majority of 8 in the House. We're going to put up a list on the wall now of people who have had problems with various elements of this bill as it has been passing along. And then let me just quickly play a soundbite from one of the most outspoken who has been against this. He says the Senate bill is not ready for prime time. And this is Andy Harris, the Republican from Maryland. Watch.
The bottom line is this is not ready for prime time. We support the president's agenda. The president's agenda was not to raise the deficit by $750 billion over the next 10 years. The bottom line is now the House is going to have its say. This is not going to sail through the House. We're going to have to negotiate with the Senate one more time.
So you've got a lot of members who wanted to see deeper cuts. They want to see not a $5 trillion debt ceiling. That's a big concern of theirs. So what do you say to those members who are still on the fence at this point?
Right, and we've been communicating with a lot of those members. I just left another meeting with the Speaker. We were talking through some of those questions. And, keep in mind, Andy Harris did not vote for the bill when it left the House. So, that was one of the votes we didn't have initially. Members are looking through the changes that were made in the Senate, as they all should. But at the end of the day, this bill has over 85% of all the provisions for President Trump's agenda that left the House. And frankly, if you look at the most important provisions, ensuring no family gets a tax increase, that's $3.5 trillion, $4.5 trillion of a tax increase we prevent in this bill. That's still intact in this bill. Following through on President Trump's promises to give them the funding for border security, building the wall, technology for our border agents, which is a huge priority for a lot of us in this bill still. Energy security, promoting energy security is in this bill. So all of those things are still in the bill to get the economy moving, to help families who are struggling. And so members, I think, ultimately want to get that bill to the president's desk. We're looking at bringing that bill in the morning.
Okay, that goes to my next question. Give us a sense, if I were someone who was on the fence about this bill, tell me what are you saying to them? How strongly are you sending this message that it sounds like this is as good as this bill is going to get?
Well, and as you've seen through this whole process, which has gone on for months, every change you make on one side of the bill to appease maybe one group of people can impact the group negatively for 20 other members on the other side of the bill. So it's not as easy as saying, hey, I just want one more change, because one more change could end up being what collapses the entire thing. And so it's always been a delicate balance. You saw that through the House, and then you saw that through the Senate. JD Vance had to break the tie, as he did, to get the bill through. But at the same time, this bill delivers on so many things that are good for America's economy, for families in America who gave us this mandate, the House, Senate, and White House, to go deliver on all of the things that are in this bill. It's why it's important that we get it done.
So, that doesn't sound like a strong arm, but I understand that there is an effort that will be very aggressive to get anybody who's not on board with this. And you just said a moment ago that you expect a vote in the morning. So that's on the rules or the vote that comes after that. Give us a sense of timing.
Yeah, on both, Martha. In the morning, we'll bring the rule first, and then, of course, we'll bring the bill itself in the form it came from the Senate. And like I said, a lot of members that are reading through the bill now that have questions also are asking those same other questions. Gee whiz, what if I just make one more change to the bill? And they're even getting the realization that even if you make that change that you want, it's going to adversely affect the bill for a large enough group to bring it down.
Yeah. What's your bet right now? Is it going to pass tomorrow?
I'm very confident it will pass. And the question you have to ask is, if this bill doesn't pass, what are the consequences? They would be severe. Let's get this bill passed and get this economy moving again and deliver on President Trump's agenda.
Yeah, could have some ramifications for a lot of people if the majority that has the White House, the Senate, and the House can't get this through. So we'll be watching, of course, very closely. Good to see you, Leader Scalise.
Let's get it done. Thanks.
Today.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.